Good morning, my friends. How are you? I'm continuing our conversation on everyday immortality. And as I do so, I want to remind you that this is a series. And so today I think we are on chapter 9 of this series, which is everyday immortality. How to live today and every day as a timeless being so that you understand that you are, in fact, a timeless being. And a previous series before this was on the mystery of death and opening the windows to the dreamscape, which is birth, life, process as a person, death, recycling, etc., etc. The mystery of death. Please check that out. And before that, I did a whole series also, about 15 videos on spiritual solutions for anxiety, existential anxiety, suffering, and the fear of death. And the reason I'm reminding you of all these previous videos, they're all kind of entangled in going into the deep mystery of our existence, which is something that is becoming of interest now to people because no longer are a lot of people taking existence for granted. It's a big mistake to take existence for granted, because then when it is threatened, you go into panic. But if you unravel the mystery of existence, and don't take it for granted, start with surprise, bewilderment, because existence is a mystery. And awareness of existence is also a mystery. So address existence, which is who am I, what do I want to know, why do I know what I want to know, why do I want to know who I am or what I am and what I want. It starts with there. It starts with questions and reflection and contemplation and mindful awareness and transcendence. And if we pursue this, then we realize that birth, death, everything in between is a story. And actually, you are the infinite being that has identified selectively with memories. So you are the infinite being with a selective memory. And that infinite being with a selective memory is a process that we call a person. In the deeper reality, there's no such thing, okay? What we call a person, Deepak Chopra, is a name given to this experience. And with this experience, every other experience that's happening, that's actually unified with this experience, a changing body-mind, and that experience, a changing perceptual activity, interpreted as a changing world. So the person, the process that we call the person, and the changing world are a unified experience in what we've been calling I am. I am is the infinite being with a selective memory. Not only a selective memory, but also a selective imagination based on that memory. And that selective imagination recycles as previous memories, but also upgrading those memories to new levels of expression and creativity, and on and on. So your physical body is just the place your memories call home for the time being. This is the perspective that comes to us from regarding consciousness as the ontological primitive. So pure consciousness is infinite consciousness. shapeless, causeless, infinite, non-reducible, timeless, formless. But it ceaselessly modifies itself into experiences. And raw experiences are just those: sensations, images, feelings, thoughts, perceptions, and thoughts. Because thoughts are interpretations of raw experiences. And then there are emotions, which are also an activity of consciousness. So consciousness, pure consciousness, is the infinite being. It modulates itself selectively by identifying with selective memories, selective imagination, selective desires, and then it recycles the old memory and also actually creates a new model based on the insights of the old memory and the creativity that's inherent in consciousness. So identity as body-mind constantly shifts, and so does experience as body-mind constantly shifts. And right now what we're doing is we are looking at the divine code of life. And I got this idea after reading this book, The Divine Code of Life, Awaken Your Genes and Discover Hidden Talents by Kazuo Murakami, a geneticist who is well known, 84 years old, in Japan, does and has done an immense amount of research on what we call genetic switches, the on-off of genetic activity that regulates our body. And so there's a lot to say about this, and I have also said a lot about this in the past, but today I want to pick up one paragraph from the book and then expound on it through a meta-human perspective. So I'm now starting to read from Dr. Murakami's book. It is possible that our genes contain not only the memories and abilities passed down from one generation to the next, but also those from the entire evolutionary process that spans several billion years. So remember, I said this yesterday, phrased it differently, but same thing, that your genes carry the memory of not only biological evolution, but cosmic evolution. That the human embryo during gestation repeats the process of evolution within the womb suggests that this information is controlled within the genes of the first cell. First cell is a pluripotential cell, the stem cell, the fertilized egg. The potential of the entire human race is contained within the genes of that individual. Imagine, the potential of the entire human race is contained within the genes of that individual. Genes do not age. Okay, now this is what Dr. Murakami is saying. Genes do not age. What he's basically saying is that the sequence of nucleotides, the sequence of the alphabet that spells the word, which is called gene, the word itself, the code, does not change. Okay? The code does not change. What changes is the activity of the code. And the activity of the code is governed by what today are called epigenetic on-off switches. And there's a biochemical basis to these on-off switches. So when there's something called methylation that turns a genetic switch off. And then there are other processes, deacetylation and on, that can also turn on the switches. And right this moment, your genetic switches are going on and off ceaselessly because of changing states of consciousness, which means changing sensations, changing images, changing thoughts, changing emotions, changing perceptions, and changing interpretations of those perceptions. Not to mention everyday activities like sleep, the cycles of rest and activity, dreams, eating, breathing, digestion, metabolism, elimination, sensory experience, feelings, thoughts, imagination, creativity, Yeah. All of that is being orchestrated as a unified experience through the onning and offing of genetic switches. So genetic switches are going on and off. And what's changing those genetic switches is experience. You are the metabolism of experience, both the perceptual experience and then any cognitive experience, mental experience, emotions, choices, volition, all those experiences are ceaselessly orchestrating the on and the off of your genetic switches. The genes themselves do not age. However, as we grow old, some of the genetic switches can become dysfunctional, particularly genetic switches that turn the switch off, methylation switch. And when the switch is turned off, then genes that should not be producing peptides or proteins, usually inflammatory peptides and proteins, and they go out of control, and there's inflammation, and then there's compromising of immune system, and that leads to chronic illness. So the illnesses that we associate with old age, infirmity, like diabetes, arthritis, even autoimmune illnesses get more frequent, propensity to infection, heart disease, stroke, cancer, all of these are basically age-related too, to a great extent. Of course, the genetic on-off switch can be dysfunctional at an early age, and there can be mutations that give rise to things like cancer, but age-related diseases are basically a function of some malware or malfunction in the on-off switches and the orchestration of these on-off switches, which is correlated. And what is turning these switches on and off? Well, I'm saying consciousness is. Consciousness, by modifying itself into experience in the form of sensations, images, feelings, thoughts, perceptions, interpretations, creates these on-off switches. And so consciousness is turning the on-off switches. If I do something as simple as move my hand or look here or look there or start to speak, I'm already orchestrating the on-off switches of genetic codes in order to evoke this experience. Any experience, even a sensory experience or a motor experience, is a fluctuation of sensations, perceptions, thoughts, feelings, images that are orchestrated as a result of the on-off switches. The on-off switches themselves are also a perceptual experience. They're called neural correlates, and those are also experiences. So you can't get behind the fact that everything that we call reality is actually a perceptual activity and an interpretation of perceptual activity happening in consciousness that also includes the genes themselves, the markers themselves, the neural correlates themselves. Okay, anyway, having said that, Dr. Murakami says that genes do not age. With few exceptions, the genes you have as a teenager are still the same when you are in your 80s. Isn't that amazing? If genes aged, you could not pass genetic information on to your descendants. So, an 80-year-old can have, an 80-year-old man can contribute to the birth of a baby by donating his sperm or, ovulate, fertilizing an ovum, which means that genes can still impart the information necessary for new life. Women stop ovulating after menopause, but if you put a fertilized ovum in their womb and then the appropriate environment for hormones, then there can be the birth of a baby. Also, there's something called cloning. You can take a skin cell and ultimately with technology, as was done in the case of Dolly, the sheep. A mammary cell was taken, and then it was injected into an ovum, put in a test tube. The mammary cell of a pig created a pig. So this cell that was taken from the breast had the potential to contribute to the creation of life. And that's what cloning is. Theoretically, you could take a little bit of your skin, scruff it off, and each cell could be turned into a human being. And you could create millions of versions of yourself because the genetic information doesn't age. Okay. Now, as we age, you and I age, our body ages, then of course there's a program for aging. And that program, apparently, according to current biologists, has a limitation. And that limitation is called the Hayflick Limit, named after a scientist. The Hayflick Limit says that cells can only divide 50 to 60 times, and after that they can't divide anymore because the genetic program for division is over. And that is called apoptosis, programmed cellular death, which is necessary for the recycling of our cells. And this programmed cellular death is different for different cells in the body. So your skin cells recycle once a month, your stomach cells every 5 days, your bone cells every 3 months, your DNA every 6 weeks. But even though it contains the memories of billions of years of both biological evolution and cosmic evolution. So something is recycling, and what is recycling is selective memory, which is formless. Memory itself is formless because it's a modified form of formless infinite being, selectively identifying with the formless memory. And that formless memory is recycling as the experience of sensations, images, feelings, thoughts, which are all memories, but appearing as the printout that we call the physical body. But the printout is changing because the software program is also changing as a result of the on-off switches. It's totally fascinating. But what implications does this have? The implications of this are that by turning or participating consciously in the on and off of the switches, we can actually influence the process of aging. I've said this now for several decades. When I wrote my book, Ageless Body, Timeless Mind, the ageless body referred to the body of consciousness, and timeless mind referred to the infinite being that is modifying itself as the process that we call a person. And then I wrote another book after that called Grow Younger, Live Longer with my associate Dr. David Simon, which was about the 10 ways to reverse aging. So aging is flexible. It can stop, it can slow down, it can reverse, and then it can start again, ultimately ending in death, because death is the way. Life not only recycles memory, but also creativity. So life is the recycling of memory and creativity, the recycling of energy, information, molecules, matter, but ultimately the recycling of consciousness, which not only recycles but evolves to higher levels of creativity, diversity, imagination, and expression. So going back to Dr. Murakami, he says, therefore we can assume that genes do not age, with the caveats I've mentioned, at least not fundamentally. If you lead an ordinary life, your genes will change very little, although they can change in response to unusual external factors such as radiation or harmful drugs such as thalidomide. For the most part, genes remain stable. It is never too late to develop your potential. Okay, so that's basically what Dr. Murakami is saying about you can change the activity of your genes, and therefore, because genes are also responsible for what we call the aging process, the software, is contained by influencing the on of switches. We can actually influence the experience that we call biological age. So the average age of a human being in the last century was, believe it or not, in the 19th century. I'm not talking about the 21st century, but in the 19th century, the average age of a human being was less than 50 years. And the average age of a human being, say, in the Roman Empire, would have been about 28 years. Today, the fastest growing segment of the American population and many parts of the world is actually the age over 100. The fastest growing segment of the American population is over the age of 100. Fastest growing. Okay, it doesn't mean there are many more 100-year-olds than 50-year-olds, obviously not, but the fastest growing rate of population is over the age of 100. And this is attributed to things like better nutrition and sanitation and better living conditions and to some extent immunization, etc., etc. But that's not the point. The real point is that aging is flexible, that it can slow down, it can stop for a while, it can resume again, it can even be reversed. And the way we measure aging, of course, is through things like blood pressure, bone density, body temperature regulation, aerobic capacity, immune function, endocrine function, body temperature regulation that I mentioned, skin thickness, the number of wrinkles that you might have, your ability to be creative, your access to memories, your muscle mass, the strength of muscles, sex hormone levels, other hormone levels. All these are actually biological markers of aging. And today there are even more sophisticated markers of aging, including things like telomerase, which is an enzyme that controls the length of telomeres, which are little extensions of buttons at the end of your chromosomes. And all the research, not only at the Chopra Foundation, but with others, shows that these biological markers of aging are extremely flexible. In fact, one of our studies showed that in a retreat that people took called the Seduction of Spirit for 1 week, and the retreat involved lots of meditation and yoga and breathing, along with emotional resilience and intelligence, and the level of the enzyme telomerase went up by 40%. And that suggests reversal of aging. And also all the genes that were responsible for self-regulation went up, some 17-fold. All the genes that were responsible for excessive inflammation went down. And therefore, the physical body was changing its expression of aging in 1 week. Telomerase changed by 40%. I don't think there's any drug that can do that, because drugs are reductionist. They act at certain levels, not although their side effects can be holistic, because even though we think of drugs as targeted to an organ, there are receptors to these drugs everywhere. So drugs can cause side effects and all kinds of things, because they weren't developed with the whole system in mind, a unified holistic process which is in consciousness. So now, what is the importance of what I'm saying right now? Well, if you want to influence how you age, if you want to minimize your chances of infirmity or chronic illness or inflammation or anxiety or depression as you grow older, then you can do it. That's all I'm saying. You can do it. And you can do it through all the lifestyle measures I've mentioned. Elsewhere, I've talked about the 10 ways to reverse aging, including changing perception of the physical body, changing perception of aging, changing experience and perception of time, also deep rest and meditation and sleep, mind-body coordination, deep breathing, yoga, exercise, removing toxins from the body, being flexible both in body and attitude, experiencing love, the emotion of love. All these actually can reverse the biological markers of aging, including just a youthful attitude of curiosity, wonder, and bewilderment can all influence the biological markers of aging. But that's not really what I want to talk about. What I want to really talk about today is that if you understand that your body is not made of matter, because matter is a mental construct for a perceptual activity. If you understand that your body is not made of energy, energy is a mental construct for the ability to do work. If you understand that your body is not made of information, information is the resolution of uncertainty out of ambiguity. If you realize that your body is not made out of that, but if you realize that your body and the experience of the body is consciousness, that's it. Then you can influence the aging process. If you realize that energy, information, matter, molecules, force fields, gravity, anything that you can name is actually a modeling of experience. And experience is perceptual activity and its interpretation. And that it is therefore a modification of consciousness, and therefore your body is an intermittent stream of sensations and perceptions interpreted as a physical body. If your body is modified consciousness, and in fact consciousness in its original state is formless, then by going back to the experience of formless body, you can influence the expression of the body that appears as form and phenomena. Influence it. You can change the programming. And that programming is changed by going to the source of all experience. So experience is sensations, experience is perceptions, experience is thoughts, experience is emotions, experience is images, experience is interpretations, experience is all the models of reality that we create, whether they're biological models, mathematical models, physical models, ultra-structural models, wave particle models. Even the models are an experience in consciousness. So anything that we call the physical or mental world is a modified experience of consciousness modulating itself as that. And this modulation is actually occurring unconsciously all the time. Let me see, I wrote something here that I thought was very important, and that is that no conscious activity is required for you to exquisitely fine-tune the on and off of genetic switches so that they function perfectly without resistance, without anticipation, without being influenced by the past conditioned mind. It's the natural evolution of gene expression to go from, let's say, less complex expressions to high complex expressions. And so, the complex expressions are at every level, ultrastructural, microscopic, cellular, at the level of particles and waves, but also macroscopic. You can see that the expressions of consciousness are ceaselessly changing their states. And yet those states can be influenced by the source of those states. And the source of those states, going back to the original qualities of pure consciousness, consciousness field of infinite possibilities. So consciousness is infinite being, formless. Consciousness is infinitely correlative. It correlates every activity, synchronizes, entangles every activity with every other activity, from the cellular to the cosmic. Okay, so that's another quality of consciousness. Consciousness is inherently creative. It continuously evolves into higher expressions of creativity. Consciousness is also inherently unpredictable, because without unpredictability, there's no creativity. And consciousness is the source of attention, which is awareness, listening, being aware, and then also intention, changing what you're aware of. So I'm right now aware of my hand. I'm asking you to be aware of my hand as well. And then I'm moving my hand. So being aware of the hand is attention. It stimulates a part of the brain called the sensory cortex just by being aware. And then moving, changing those sensations is intention, which also stimulates a part of the cortex called the motor cortex. In this case, the right hand, it's in the left cortex. If you were the left hand, right cortex. But where is the experience happening? Where is the experience of sensations happening? If I pinch my hand right now, it seems that the pain or the discomfort is here. But if I block the sensory cortex with an anesthetic, then the pain here disappears, which means somehow there's a switch here in the sensory cortex that is actually making it possible to experience the pain here. But the switch is here. But what is turning the switch on and off? It is consciousness through the acts of attention and intention. Attention and intention. So who's giving the command to the motor cortex to move? What is giving the command to the motor cortex to move? Or what is giving the command to the sensory cortex to experience this, which is a combination of sensations? What is it? We call it consciousness. This is volition, and this is cognition and perception. That's all there is. And how I feel about this is emotion. Okay, so can you see that consciousness is creating all the experience, whether it's a pinch here, or a neural network here, or the understanding of the neural network, or the idea of a neural network, or the image of a neural network through a microscope. All is happening in consciousness. The idea of neural networks, on-off switches, the hand, the movement of the hand, the sensations of the hand, it's all a unified experience in you, in consciousness. And where is that consciousness? Can't find it. Why can't we find it? Because it can't be seen. Why can't it be seen? Because it is doing the seeing. It can't be heard. Why? Because it's doing the hearing and also creating the hearing. It can't be tasted, smelled, sensed, because it's doing all of those. It is conceiving, constructing, becoming, and experiencing all of those. And even as it does it, it says, been there, done that, recycle, create another experience. And that creates all our provisional identities and all our modes of knowing and experience. And all we have to do is wake up to fundamental reality. So, my dear friends, wake up to fundamental reality instead of worrying about my glasses or my hair and all that stuff. It's not important. Okay? Wake up to fundamental reality and be free to create your reality. Any reality you want, you can create if you wake up to fundamental reality. So, today, what could be our assignment? The assignment is, if you want to influence the experience of your body, experience your body as formless. How do you do that? Well, first of all, close your eyes. As soon as you close your eyes, the form and the appearance of the body is gone. What's left? What's left is sensations, sounds, maybe some smells, maybe some tastes, but mostly sensations. In fact, smells, sounds, sensations, even thoughts are sensations on the screen of consciousness. So all that's left when you close your eyes is sensations, sounds, thoughts, maybe images in consciousness, maybe interpretations, maybe memories, but none of what I'm saying actually has a physical form. No sensation has a physical form, and no image has a physical form. Okay? So what is it that you're experiencing? You're experiencing pure consciousness and formless being. And as long as you're experiencing pure consciousness, formless being, and you make that the anchor of all experience, then understand yourself as formless. More you practice this experience of formless being in yoga nidra, in deep sleep, in dream state, the more you do that, you will actually be able to experience that from the level of formless being, you can change the form and the phenomena. You can change the experience of that which you call the body. Because who you are is an infinite being with a selective memory, and the recycling of the selective memory that we call the physical body. So today, the mantra is Aham. Aham just means I am, period. Before I am form and phenomena, I am. Aham. Regina Pendleton says Shalom. Let's use that. Shalom. And just with that mantra, anchor yourself to your formless being. And know from that level, through selective attention and intention to what you want, you can manipulate or turn the switches of aging on and off. The switching on of genes that cause self-regulation modulate aging in a healthy direction. The switches that cause inflammation modulate aging in an unhealthy direction. And aging, healthy aging means growing old gracefully, happily, and having fun. Okay, lightness of being, aham, formless being, is so light that you don't even feel it. Lightness of being. Being is so light that you don't feel it. It's formless. But then it can modify itself to any form through attention, intention, within the limits of the programming of the software. Okay, so today, just think of your physical body as formless being, aham. And let's see what happens. Ramanand Dikshit agrees. Anyone disagree so far? I am. Om. Amen. Aham. Shalom. Ein Sof. Pure being. Eddie Yuli says, I'm putting your work in my graduate work, Deepak. Thank you. Okay, my friends. See you tomorrow.